Welcome to Headline Hunting. I'm your host, Joe Farrar. Today we're going to read between the lines of some of the top headlines from the world of mixed martial arts, joined by Mike Bond once again. Mike, Ronda Rousey, you wrote a bunch of pieces for MMA Junkie and USA Today Sports. She is always in the headlines. It seems to never end with the world champ.
Yeah, absolutely. And she appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast the other day. He didn't really make any mention of it until right before they went on air. And it was a pretty interesting 2-hour conversation. Not her coach, Edmund Taverdian, was there, and it was more about kind of the mentality and their training, and definitely a different side of Ronda. But of course, if you get her in front of a microphone for 2 hours, you're going to get quite a few, grabby quotes. And she certainly delivered that, saying some very interesting things about Cyborg, about how her career would be unfinished without that fight. And also what I found very interesting was she kind of questioned the mentality of the rest of the women in her weight class, saying that she thinks they do want to be UFC champions, but I don't know if she doesn't know if they're ready for it, all the responsibilities, the obligations that come along with it. So it was a pretty interesting interview, and Ronda Rousey is always making headlines.
Yeah, and I agree with definitely a lot of what you said. Now, you mentioned careers being finished. Big Nog, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira has hung up his gloves. He has called it a career. We can go for hours and hours about memories of Big Nog. Me personally, every time I got to see him, all we talked about was never MMA. It was about soccer, Italy versus Brazil, and espresso. But I'm glad he's finally decided to hang up the gloves.
Yeah, I think everyone is. They should have. A lot of people think maybe he should have gone away after that Roy Nelson knockout last year. That was a really bad one. But I am happy that that wasn't the last image that we had in our mind of, this great legend competing in the octagon. He fought at 190 in Brazil in August. I had the privilege of being ringside for that fight, for his last fight. And it's not like he got blown out of the water there. He clearly lost, but just having a more competitive fight where he was actually in it is a lot better memory of Nogueira and, his legendary stature than, a brutal knockout at the hands of Roy Nelson. So I'm happy he went out that way. The UFC is giving him this job as kind of an ambassador for Brazil, kind of a Matt Hughes-esque job for the Brazilian fighters. So, he has a wealth of knowledge. He's been around the game for so long that it's very good that the UFC is bringing him on board and helping him, putting him in a position where he can help these younger fighters, because the amount of fighters and talent coming out of Brazil right now is almost too much to keep up with. So if he can help mold some of that, it's only going to be good things for the future.
Yeah, he is absolutely an excellent role model for these young guys and girls coming up in the sport from Brazil. You mentioned legend, you mentioned heavyweights, you mentioned, there's a guy that Antonio Rodrigo faced one time, Fedor. He faced him a bunch of times. This appears to be a situation that continues to make headlines on a daily basis. There was a report earlier this week that he, in fact, had signed with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It hasn't been confirmed just yet, but it seems to me, Mike, that this Fedor signing is imminent, whether it is with the UFC, Bellator, or who knows, that new promotion in Japan that could be coming up.
Yeah, he's definitely coming back, it seems, just from all the pieces you put together, from, the photos of him training, what other fighters out of Russia are saying, there seems to be a lot of smoke, and where there's smoke, there's fire in the sport. So we don't know exactly where he's going to end up, but the UFC did comment on that report, and they said they have nothing to report at this time. So it's not like they were saying, no, we're not in negotiations with Fedor, all these kind of things. And it seems like, things are on the right track, things are happening here. And it seems more like a matter of, when, not if. So who knows, there's, this big press conference coming up in Las Vegas on Friday, where they're really, before the UFC 191 weigh-ins, where they're going to be, doing a big press conference with all the fighters lined up for the rest of the year and the main events and all that stuff. So who knows, maybe they pull a swerve on us and, announce that there, maybe not. There's a lot of possibilities, but it seems everyone's pretty confident at this point that Fedor is going to end up in one of these big promotions, and the UFC seems like the best option at this point.
And good call by the UFC by having this press conference on Friday, because, as you know, whenever Mighty Mouse Johnson fights, despite the fact if you were looking for a perfect mixed martial artist, the definition, it would be Mighty Mouse Demetrius Johnson. But again, he's fighting in the main event. There doesn't seem to be much hype, and he's taking on John Dodson in a rematch where a guy that could potentially beat him has the capability and skills to beat him. Are you surprised again that there isn't much hype when Demetrius Johnson fights in a main event?
It's tough, because at this point, should we be surprised? His past couple fights, people legitimately inside the venue. People are walking out, as the main event is starting, during the main event. I don't know what it is. He's such a talented fighter, and it's just something there that people seemingly can't grab onto. They say, how are you going to sell a Demetrious Johnson pay-per-view when you put him against a Kyoji Horiguchi who can't speak English, is basically doing nothing to sell the fight, and you put Demetrious in this really, pretty much a no-win situation where he's going to get criticized for being the main event, all these kind of things. But then you have this John Dodson fight, the rematch, 2.5 years in the making, his most competitive fight. John Dodson, a guy with crazy knockout power for that weight class who, is talking all kinds of things about Demetrious Johnson, saying all these grabby quotes, but still, we obviously at MMA Junkie, we get to see, the traffic metrics, what articles people are clicking on, all these kind of things. And even with, quotes that are very interesting from Demetrious saying he wants to break Anderson Silva's all-time defense record, John Dodson saying he wants to murder, death, kill Demetrious Johnson, the clicks, the people, the interest, the readers, they just still aren't really there. So it's really difficult to say what could take a change for Demetrious in this, kind of position where he's in, where people don't seem all that interested. But, this is the fight that you would think would make it happen. So I don't really know what to say at this point. If this fight with John Dodson, this rematch can't, pull decent numbers on pay-per-view, isn't going to get people reading the articles, I really don't know where we go from here with this guy.
Well, we're going to go right now real quick because we don't have much time. A prediction on the main event for Saturday night. Can John Dodson pull it off?
I don't think so. It would be, what a story it would be though. Hey, he has a baby earlier this week, already in Vegas, leaves to go back to Albuquerque, watches his child born, goes back to Las Vegas, finishes, his preparation, and then goes out and fights and wins the title. That would be a heck of a story, but he's going against a guy, Demetrious Johnson, that just makes no mistakes in there. He's nearly the perfect fighter. And we saw in the first fight, Dodson does have the power to hurt him, but I think Johnson's come so far in these past 2.5 years that I think it could be another competitive 5-round fight. But I think Johnson, like he did the first time, will do the little things that matter to get the win.
Mike, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.